Hello, I'm Robert Walker. I'm a voluntary fact checker and helping you if you're scared of many things. And this is to explain to you that it's utterly impossible for Iran to fight a world war, and nobody's going to come in on its side either. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And I know the news is full of people talking away, learned heads apparently, and politicians and so on, claiming that some of this can escalate or it can spiral out of control, and they never explain how, because it's impossible. It just can't be done. So this is Iran. This is Tehran, the capital of Iran. And Israel is now flying its fighter jets over there every day. It's got complete air control. The Iranians can't shoot them down. They can't do anything about it. Because Iran destroyed all of, Israel destroyed all of Iran's air defences right at the start of the war on day one. And there's nothing left of them. But from some soldiers probably have man pads, which you could, in principle, use to shoot down a fighter jet if it's flying very low. Just shoulder mounted. That's about all that's probably left in Iran, and they've not succeeded. And Iran's own fighter jets, they can't fly over its own capital city. So let's go and have a look. This is a photograph of where Iran keeps its fighter jets. It has them in underground caves, which got tens or hundreds of meters of rock above them to protect them from Israeli bombing, but they won't dare to come out of their caves. And the reason is these are ancient fighter jets that Iran has got. And they're so ancient that the Israeli fighter jets, they can shoot them down from hundreds of kilometers away before they can even see the Israeli fighter jets. All the Iranian fighter jets can do is fly away and hide and hope they don't get spotted. That's all they can do in this war. So Iran's not going to be able to fight anyone in the air. It's got its ballistic missiles, yes. Let's go quickly look at that. So let's scroll down a little bit on this page and I'll come to this, show you this ballistic missiles. So this is how far Iran's ballistic missiles can be fired in principle. And they can fire about to there from the most further, so they could get to, in principle, beyond Greece and beyond Turkey. But Iran has absolutely no interest. It couldn't get to France or United Kingdom or United States. But Iran got those in order to hit Israel. And its ballistic missiles, Iran is a huge country, and from the easternmost end of Iran, its own ballistic missiles can't even reach Israel. So that's why it has them so long. So they can fire at Israel, not from the closest point, but from almost anywhere in the westernmost part of Iran. They can hit Israel. And they don't have ICBMs. They can't have them because they haven't developed the technology. So Iran has fired a couple of small satellites into orbit to use for space observation. It hasn't even tested an aeroshell, and an aeroshell would be utterly useless because aeroshells work by slowing down hugely. And the way Apollo did its precision landing was to skip off the Earth's atmosphere and take a long time to come down to land precisely in one place. An ICBM, and that would take ages and ages and be very easy to shoot down. If Iran was to try to send something at intercontinental ballistic missiles with an aeroshell, it could maybe even do that without much testing, but it would be utterly useless. It could be so easy to shoot down. It would be spending tens of minutes landing. And so what the ICBMs, they're very streamlined. This is the Minuteman III, an American ICBM. They go through the atmosphere as quickly as possible. They speed up and they go as fast as possible through the atmosphere. And then they remain very precise control as they're buffeted around by the atmosphere. And this is something that needs several tests, maybe half a dozen tests or something like that, and dedicated research into making an ICBM. And Iran hasn't done that. So it's impossible for Iran. It doesn't have the technology. And even of those ones that can go this far, like the ones that go as far as that, it's got very few of those. And it's got perhaps, the estimates vary between a few hundred and 2,000. And it's already fired 370 at Israel, of whatever number it has. And the problem Iran has is with its launchers. So it's got truck-mounted launchers that drive around through Tehran and then fire these ballistic missiles, and through the rest of Iran and fire ballistic missiles at Israel. The problem with that is, because of Iran's air defense is completely destroyed, then Israel can just fly over Iran, and as soon as it sees a ballistic missile being fired up, it can actually shoot those ballistic missiles on the way up, so it's destroyed a lot of ballistic missiles before they take off. It can see where it's being fired from, just flies very quickly up to that and destroys the launcher. And they destroyed 120 of them in the first day, I think. And they keep destroying them. And yesterday, on Tuesday, Iran fired 20 ballistic missiles in its first salvo of the day. It fired 10 in the second salvo. It fired 2 in the last salvo. And so that suggests it only had 2 ballistic missiles launchers available for its third salvo. I don't know what it's doing today, I haven't yet checked, but each day it produces less, it fires less and less of these ballistic missiles. And also, it may have 2,000, but they are stored in underground caverns, a lot of them, to be protected from Israeli missiles. And Israel has bombed all of the tunnels that lead into these underground silos where they keep all the ballistic missiles. This means that Iran's ballistic missiles are locked underground and they can't access them, a lot of them. And they would get through quite quickly, maybe a few days to a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months, if the Israelis have collapsed the entrances. But they're locked and inaccessible for the duration of this war. And even if they tried to break their way into the underground sashes of ballistic missiles, Iran would just block the entrances again. So Iran is totally helpless here. Its ballistic missiles, it's using up its ballistic missiles, and they're mostly gone. The ballistic missile launchers, a lot of those are gone. They fire less and less with each salvo. They're easier to shoot down by Israel each time. Now let's look at the other ways that Iran could try and fight a global war. So now we look at its navy. Its navy consists of 3 small frigates. It wouldn't be allowed through the Suez Canal. So if it was trying to attack the United States, it would have to fly around the Cape of Good Hope, around South Africa, and try to get to the United States that way. With 3 small frigates taking weeks to get there, having to refuel frequently, makes utterly no sense. Now look at it on the ground. Then Iran is, if I just go down here, have a look at one of my other maps down here, imagine it trying to approach on the ground. And this is how Israel is attacking Iran. It bypasses Jordan, flies through Syria, and then flies through Iraq. Now, these countries are not going to let Israel drive a huge army, especially through Iraq, which is US held. US is not going to allow Israel to drive a huge army through Iraq to fight Iran. And Iran's army, it's got some armoured vehicles. They're certainly going to be not going to be allowed to drive through Iraq to fight Israel. So these 2 countries can't fight on the ground. Now, as you can see, Israel is got almost no access to. It'd be very difficult to Israel to send any ships around to Iran, which is up here, go all the way around and up there. And Iran can't attack Israel by sea. And Iran would, as I said, would have to go around the Cape of Good Hope, because it's got to avoid the Suez Canal. It was to try to attack Europe or to attack the United States. So the 2 countries can't fight each other in the sea. They can't fight each other by land. Israel can fly fighter jets over Iran every day, and because Iran's got no air defences left, Israel has complete air control over Iran. And so Iran can't do any fighting with its fighter jets. So all it's got are these ballistic missiles. It's not got very many left. and it's got very few launchers that it could use to fire those. So I hope you can see that Iran can't fight a global war. And you're at no risk in the United Kingdom, no risk in the United States, in France or anywhere. And even in the area, then Iran is not going to be fighting these other countries. It is firing its ballistic missiles only at Israel. If the United States joins the war, it will try to fire some ballistic missiles at US bases. But it turns out Trump is extremely risk averse for any risk to American soldiers. So despite all his bluffs, I don't think that the United States would enter this war unless Trump is sure that Israel has got rid of all of Iran's ballistic missiles. I'd be very surprised if he enters the war and exposes US bases to the vulnerability from Iranian ballistic missiles, just for even one or two to die. Trump has ordered 26 military attacks during his 2 terms, and only the first one in January 2020 had 1 US casualties. All the others have had 0 US casualties, and maximum of 100 of other countries. So I can't see Trump ordering a strike that risks US casualties. But we'll see. We'll see what he does. But if he does, then there's nothing. The maximum that Iran could do is could fire some missiles that might hit some US military bases in the area, and might, if they're incredibly lucky because their missiles or unlucky for the Americans, because their missiles most of them have an error of hundreds of meters, very few of them are very accurate, then they might hit an American soldier, and the American soldier might die. That is about the limits of what Iran could do in this war. And it's highly unlikely it can do that, given how it's been degraded. So now, so that hopefully you can see that Iran can't do anything. Then people say, but Russia will. Well, let's look at Russia. And first of all, just to see this example of the Iraq war. Nobody came in on the side of Iraq. There were 42 countries from all the continents of the world except Antarctica, all fighting Iraq, and in this little area here. And nobody came in on Iraq's side. And then there was a second war, and the second war it was a smaller group of countries, again all fighting Iraq. Iraq not able to attack any of them back, except maybe very, very closest. And then they of course took over Iraq the second time around. So now we're looking at Russia. So I just want to explain first, maybe this map so you can just producing it because you can see it. Then Russia had a base here in Syria, Tartus base, just about where the plus is there, and that was very valuable for Russia. It was its only foreign base outside the former Soviet Union. And its only foreign base, it's got some bases in the Black Sea, but its other bases are all up here, way up north beyond Norway, and then it's got some in Kaliningrad, which is there. It's got a base there as well, and it's got another base there. And those are its only bases. If it wants to go to Mediterranean, it has to go all the way around like that. And this is shut off. The Bosporus Strait is shut off by Turkey during the Ukraine war. So Russia sacrificed a lot by losing its Tartus base there. It's got no other bases outside anywhere in the world outside the former Soviet Union. So that's Russia. And this base was incredibly important for Russia. And Syria, it supported the Assad regime in Syria, and it isn't supporting the Ayatollah in Iran. It's just selling weapons to him. Russia doesn't support him. It just sells him weapons, and he sells weapons back to Russia. I'll come into that in a bit more detail. So now if we go back and look at Russia, then when Assad. So this let's see, I'll turn down the sound, and so I can just play this, and you can see, you can have a look and see the sort of things that you see. These rebels, things like that. You can see that just a truck on with some soldiers on the back and with a gun, and just even an excavator, and that's what the Syrian rebels were using to take over Aleppo. So I'll just stop that. So that's what the Syrian soldiers used to take over Aleppo. And the Russian soldiers did very half-hearted attempt to support Assad. They did almost nothing. And as soon as the Syrian rebels started being a serious attempt to take over the Assad regime, and they took over Aleppo very quickly. Russia did nothing because it was almost nothing because it was caught up in the Ukraine war. And then the rebels began to take over all of Russia, all of Syria, and Russia just focused on getting their soldiers out and their equipment out of Syria as quickly as possible. And they just left Assad to his own devices. And then that's how Assad lost Syria. How Assad's regime was toppled. A very cruel regime with people in prisons and so on, and all those stories about them being freed from prison and so on. All that happened because Russia no longer has the ability it used to have to support other countries. It just doesn't have it anymore, even for Syria, which was very important to Russia and which was very close. It was supporting Assad. And it's not as supporting the Ayatollah of Iran, it's just selling him things. And Russia, it won't even sell the Ayatollah of Iran air defences, which is what its top priority right now. And it's been asking for air defences for months after, in a single raid, Israel destroyed all of the S-300s. Probably S-400s wouldn't have been much good anyway, or the S-500s. Seems none of the Russian air defences are much use against NATO weapons. That's what we discovered in Ukraine. But Russia isn't even selling them to Iran because it needs all the ones it can find in Ukraine. So Russia's not going to help Iran. So then think about that. Russia is doing nothing to help. Go back to this situation I talked to at the beginning. Israel has complete air control over Iran. The Ayatollah is hiding in a bunker. The air defences are completely gone. And Russia is doing absolutely nothing. It's not even selling anything to Iran to help it to try and defend itself from Israel. So then people say to me, but if the United States was to start joining in on Israel's side, then Russia would join in and fight back against the United States. That's nuts. When it doesn't even dare to fight, when it's not going to fight against Israel, and it doesn't even dare to fight against rebels in open trucks, how is it going to fight against the United States? It makes nonsense, utterly nonsense. There's no way Russia is going to even think of going anywhere near a United States technology. The F-35 fighter jets would run rings around the Russian fighter jets. They're far, far advanced. And just like I said, the F-16s that Iran has, they can shoot down, the Iranians have to hide in caves for that. Well, if it was the F-35s and the best Russian fighter jets, Russian jets would be the ones that have to go away and fight in caves because they're way, way outranked. They're fourth generation, fourth and a half, and the F-35 is fifth generation. And if Ukraine had just a few dozen F-35s, now Ukraine's allies could give it F-35s, and they wouldn't be combatants if they sold or gave Ukraine F-35s. They say, but we can't do that because we can't train pilots. But that's just an excuse, because there are dozens of retired F-35 pilots from the many countries around the world that fly them. And if Ukraine's allies gave it F-35s, it would then just put a call out for retired F-35 pilots to join the Ukrainian Air Force, and then they could similarly destroy all the Russian air defences over the oblasts, all four oblasts, plus Crimea, plus the border areas of Russia. They would have complete control of all of that. And they could have that in days, just like Israel had in the first day. It had complete air control of Syria. Well, if Ukraine had the F-35s, it would have complete air control of the entire occupied Ukraine and the border areas of Russia within a day, probably. And then Russia would just give up on the war at that point. So this is not going to happen. There's no way that NATO's allies are going to give it F-35s. But this is to help you to understand how much Russia is outranked by NATO. There's no way that Russia is going to try even a small engagement with NATO, because NATO has complete air superiority. It would have it very quickly, just as quickly as Israel has it over Syria. So there is no way that Russia is going to try to attack the United States in any circumstances whatsoever. And that is why Putin keeps bluffing about trying to stop people from supplying Ukraine with the best NATO equipment, because he knows he's way outranked by NATO. So that's the practicality, that's the facts of the situation. All the rest is just politics. And I don't pretend to understand the politics and why politicians say the things they do, but I can tell you about the military facts of the situation. So that's the situation. So, and then look at Russia's treaty, Iran's treaty with Russia. So people go on and on about how Iran supposedly has a treaty with Russia. Well, go and look at it. And it says, in the event that either contracting party is subject to aggression, the other contracting party shall not provide any military or other assistance to the aggressor. So in other words, all that Russia has promised is that for as long as Israel is attacking Iran, Russia will not give military assistance to Israel, which of course it never would anyway. So it's not much of a promise. And then if the United States joins the war, all Russia promises is not to give military assistance to the United States, which is a ludicrous thing for it to do. There's no way that Russia is going to start supplying Trump with means to attack Iran. But that's all it's promised not to do. And that's what all this fuss is about. People make a big fuss about this treaty. And that's all that Russia has promised to do. And Russia has kept very close ties with Israel. This is a brief history from the Associated Press. And as it says, although Russia supplied Iran with sophisticated S-300 air defense missile systems, which were all taken out on the first day in its strikes last year, and Russia's delayed providing advanced Su-35 fighter jets. I thought it had provided them, but I don't think it has. And it hasn't provided any air defences. I just given Iran nothing. It's bought lots of things. It's bought the Shahed drones from Iran. It's not sold it very much. And this is about how much Putin's is very close with the Russian Jews in Russia, and he was very close friends from a very early age. And he's called Putin's rabbi, this chap. He's very close with Putin. And this shows how many Russians, the immigration to Israel, and you can see all the red ones, are the immigrations from the former Soviet Union. So the vast numbers of Russian, at times, the majority of the immigrants to Israel have been from the former Soviet Union. So there are very large numbers of Russians there in Israel. And that's about 900,000 of the 1.5 million if you add non-Jewish members. Then it's 1.5 million. That's how many Russian Jews there are in Israel. And but Russia still has close connections with them, and Putin would not like to be involved in any way at attacking the Russian Jews in Israel. So Russia is not going to get involved. It talks about being strictly neutral. It raises various things in the UN Security Council, that's it. And China is not going to help. China is utterly no interest. and none of its Arab neighbours will help either. Syria used to be an ally of a sort, not a very sort. It allowed there were some Iranian soldiers in Syria. All the Iranian soldiers had to flee Syria when the rebels took it over. There are no Iranian soldiers left there now. And then Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran used to be able to supply Hezbollah through Syria. It can't anymore. And Hezbollah is essentially gone with all those exploding pages and things that Israel did. And the Lebanese army is not on Iran's side. Hamas is no longer a significant threat. And then the Houthi rebels, they're much further away even than Iran. And they're not a significant threat even to Israel. None of them have bases or capabilities beyond the Middle East. So that's it. I'll just upload that. There's lots of other things I want to say, but this is just to help you to understand. And yes, so I'll just briefly talk then. I'll talk about the other stuff later, but I'll just briefly talk about the people claim and worry that if the United States joins in and bombs the Fordow enrichment center, that this will somehow spread radioactivity throughout the world and make everybody die or something. That's, again, utter garbage. When I was a child, then there were nuclear tests going on, airburst explosions, every day, somewhere, every week, somewhere in the world. And the radiation doesn't spread far at all, and it very quickly fades, apart from ground to sea bursts. And the very biggest explosion of all, the one that Russia did, of the Tsar bomber, 50 megabytes, it produced so little radioactivity because it was an airburst and a hydrogen bomb, which produces less, that the investigators actually went in on the same day to investigate the site below where it was set off. And they didn't worry about the radiation. So radiation is very much misunderstood. It's only in certain situations that you get localized hotspots, and even when you have fallout with quite a lot of radiation, it very quickly loses its radioactivity. But we're not talking about a nuke here. So what people don't realize is that enriched uranium, which you use to make a nuke, is not radioactive until it has a chain reaction. It's only very, very slightly radioactive. And I've got a picture here. So she's holding, well, some of these pellets. That is just, I think that's just for uranium. But later on, she holds fuel pellets for a civilian nuclear reactor. So that's 4% enriched in her hands. And you can also hold fully enriched uranium in your hands. Not only that, you can hold plutonium in your hands. There's a rather fun story here about the Queen in 1935. Then she was handed a big lump of plutonium, and she was invited to feel how warm it was. It was safe enough to give it to the Queen and to ask her to hold it. It was plated in gold. It produces alpha particles, and they're very quickly blocked by gold. And as long as the chain reaction hasn't started, it's safe for anyone to hold it. The only risk really is very much the similar risk to lead or mercury or cadmium. You shouldn't eat it and you shouldn't breathe it because it's a toxic metal, but in very minute amounts we eat a tiny amount of uranium every day, and it's not enough to be toxic at the levels that we eat it. And the radiation is of no concern whatsoever unless you eat a lot of it. And then when it comes to plutonium, and this is the story of a Saddam driver called Philip Morrison, and he drove this is for the Trinity nuclear test, which is a very successful nuclear test. And he carried the plutonium board, which is two hemispheres, which are separate, and in the explosion they are pressed very rapidly together, and when they touch each other, that reaches the critical mass and it explodes. It has to be held together for the explosion to happen. Well, he drove, but if they're not very closely held together, they're not going to explode. He drove with those two hemispheres on his lap to the site of the test. That's how unhazardous plutonium and enriched uranium is. And both of those, the Queen and Morrison, they both died. He died in his late 80s. I think the Queen was in her 90s. So it's not a risk for later in your life either. So if the United States does hit through to the Fordov enrichment facility, which has got lots of centrifuges, and it's got a stash of 60% enriched uranium, then most of the uranium obviously is going to spread throughout that facility on the inside. But if any does get to the surface and gets leaked to the surface, it's harmless. As long as people don't go around eating the dirt and breathing in dust from it, then they're not going to be harmed by it. So there's utterly no risk to anyone from what's happening there. Not even local people, nothing. Destroying an enrichment facility will not harm even the people who live right next door to it, so long as they don't go around eating the dirt. So you tell your kids, don't eat the soil. That's about the only thing that you need to worry about if you live next door to an enrichment facility and the United States has just dropped a bomb on it. Then just tell your kids not to eat the dirt. That's the main precaution you need to take, by the way of radiation precautions. So anyway, hopefully that you can now see there's no risk to anyone anywhere in the world, apart from the only risk is from the civilians who in Tehran, from the conventional bombs that are falling on their city, and they need to build shelters, and the best place to go is in the underground. Underground is a very good place to be sheltered from the bombs. And so that if it's a reasonably deep underground, tens of meters below the ground, then you're very safe from conventional bombs. And those are the only people who really need to worry about this. The Israelis don't really need to worry much now anymore, because the Iranians are firing so few ballistic missiles back that it's quite easy to shoot them all down. So anyway, I'll stop that there so that I can upload a quick recording, and then I'll do a longer one which goes into some of the other details that I cover here. So I hope that helps you if you're scared of many things. I'll put the link in the video description. I just want to say I'm going to talk in the longer one about how we don't I'll talk as I usually do about we don't risk a war from anywhere, world war from anywhere. This is another one about Iraq. Iran clearly does not want nukes. It's not an ally of Russia, and wants security for itself and prosperity like most countries. And I just want, and I'll explain the longer one, how, for instance, these are all the countries that voted in 2024 that they want to prohibit nukes, including India, which is nuclear power. These are nuclear-free zones in the world. All the blue areas, pretty much the entire global south, is a nuclear-free zone. This is a list of countries that voted for a nuclear weapon-free zone in the Middle East. That is everyone in the Middle East except Israel. There was one vote against, that's Israel, and the 3 abstentions, which are from Argentina, Cameroon, and I forget the other one, another very small country. Argentina, Cameroon, not a small country. United States abstained on the Middle East. That means it doesn't got an objection to it. So all the countries in the Middle East voted in favour, apart from Israel and Argentina, Cameroon, and the United States. Those are the only countries that even abstained from a nuclear weapons-free zone in the Middle East. So the only reason we don't have a nuclear weapons-free zone there is because of Israel. And if Israel was to agree tomorrow that it wants a nuclear weapons-free Middle East, then it would come into place pretty much immediately. So that's another important thing to realise. So the idea that Iran is dead set on getting nukes to attack Israel is nonsense. It just wants them for defensive reasons, and I'll explain that in more detail in a longer video. And it doesn't even want them for defensive reasons, as we will find. So yes, this is the one. Iran is one of the voters for this one. Iran is one of the countries that votes to hold the Convention on Prohibition of Nukes, and Iran, of course, wants a nuclear weapon-free Middle East. And it votes every year for both of those. So Iran uses extraordinary language, but both sides use hyperbole. This is the reality of the situation. So, anyway, so now I hope that helps you. I hope it helps you be less scared. So I'll stop that recording. Look in the video description. I'll put a link to this in the video description. And any questions, do say.